Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Man on Second podcast. As always, my name is Eric Wiedeke, and I'm joined by Joe Frisaro. Don't forget, guys, we do have a lot of content coming here on this episode, so do like and subscribe to see more of that. It was a big day for the Marlins yesterday, Joe. They get the split. Sandy goes, a pretty short outing for Sandy Alcantara, I would say. 7 innings, 93 pitches. Light day's work for him. He gets selected to the All-Star game as well as Jazz Chisholm. So pretty good day all around for the Marlins, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I mean, the Marlins they kind of climbed their way back within striking distance. They've done what they needed to do in the big picture, which is get as close to 500. By this time, I think that put them in a good position as the final couple of weeks of this month leads to the trade deadline, and then more in the immediate, the All Star selections. Great news Friday, I think it was officially announced that Jazz Chisholm Jr. have won the fan vote and will be the starting second baseman, assuming he can play.
Right.
In the All Star game. Great honor for Jazz, first Marlin since 2017, Marcell Ozuna, and really not too many Marlins have been voted in. I remember when Hanley Ramirez was voted in 3 straight years as the starting shortstop, and I think it was 08, 09, and 10. And then pitching wise, Sandy, that was a no brainer. As everyone knows,
Yep.
fans do not vote for pitchers, they vote for the position players. Sandy's argument is he the All Star game starter? But, really one of the best first halves for a starting pitcher, probably in Marlins history. And Sandy is super deserving. And, that it's so magnified, Eric, to me, as someone who's covered his team for 20 years, I used to seeing Dontrell Willis go 230 innings. I didn't think much
Yep.
of it because it was more common in about 03, 04, 05.
Yep.
But he's at 130 innings right now, pre-All-Star. You have one more start, I believe it'll be Friday. That the pitchers in the max effort era and the not three times through the order era, to have a sub-2 ERA with the amount of innings pitched, the strikeouts aren't where I think some of the bottom line analytics type people who want to measure a pitcher more by their dominance in that regard don't tend to value volume as much as I kind of do, because of what that means to your overall team in terms of helping your bullpen, in terms of being out there and controlling the games that you start. The closest, as I kind of reflect in my years covering, 2004, when Carl Pavano won 18 games, which at the time was the Marlins single season record for most wins in the season. The following year, Dontrell Willis won 22, and everyone kind of forgets the 04 18-win season by Pavano. But what Pavano did that year is he was 7, 8, 9 innings, it seemed like, every start. And I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I remember kind of subconsciously going, oh, he gained a lot of wins because he was in the game when it flipped late. And he was
Yep.
still there. He wasn't out after 5 2/3 or 6 innings. He was there 7 and 8, and he was on the losing end, maybe losing 2-1, and his team rallied to win 3-2 while he was on the mound. And a real, created big value for Pavano because he signed a big free agent contract with the Yankees the following year. But volume matters, and Sandy has been really special. And you wonder if he can hold up at this level for 35 starts. But in the meantime, there's no question he's the first half MVP for the Marlins, and he almost single-handedly has put them in position to be a quasi buyer by the deadline.
Yeah, and I think it's funny because this is something that I was going to kind of bring up. Um, outside of maybe Paul Goldschmidt, let's say, and I think that this is a fun exercise to kind of take part in, because you look at the leaders in WAR in baseball, and according to what metric or what site you go by, I believe Sandy's the leader in B WAR, and I think he's top 10 in F WAR. Um, if Paul Goldschmidt slips up even a little bit, and let's say Sandy has a second half that matches the first half, and the Marlins are competitive, he's going to be one of those. He's going to be in that rarefied air where we're looking at a starting pitcher that we might, just because of the volume and say, hey, this guy's deserving to be an MVP conversation, not just for the team, but for the National League. And to your point about analytics, I think analytics doesn't account for a guy like Sandy. I think because in general, the rule is, and I think that it's not necessarily a hard and fast rule, but for most starters, you don't want them to go that third time through the order because most starters will struggle. Sandy Alcantara is not most starters. His numbers, if you look at it through the third time in the order, his ERA goes down, and the batting average the third time through goes down, which is amazing. Yeah, it's just one of those things that you don't want most pitchers trying to do what Sandy does because they're not Sandy. But he's kind of got his own set of rules.
That's a really good point, and I just wrote down some basic numbers.
Yep.
To keep this in mind, and it's to your point. Yes, he does seem to get stronger as the game goes on, which is remarkable in his own right. But just something as simple as your home road ERA. We all know Lone Depot Park is a pitcher-friendly park. You can make more mistakes in the in the middle part of the plate because guys just don't hit the ball out to the middle of the field as well. I remember having pitchers before say, if they got in a bind, they just throw like a pitch, up and away, knowing that more than likely they're not going to homer to, the opposite field. It'd be a long fly out. Or if they get a single over there, they'll live with that. Sandy's home ERA is 1.59. His road ERA is 1.88. So virtually identical, And another thing is his whip.
Yep.
0.91. And what do these things tell me? Well, yes, the Ks are 111 in 130 innings. Obviously, what's a K per 9 in the sevens, I believe. But he's not afraid to attack the strike zone. He's not afraid to induce contact. And he's one of those guys who, we've said this before, if he needs to strike out 10, he can do it. But to him, he knows his value is going deep into games on this team. And many times he's following up, because keep this in mind too. You're following the fifth starter. And we know it's been a little dicey with the Marlins' fifth starter. It is more general. Then those starters go less innings, right?
Yeah.
Some of those guys are out of the game at 4 2/3, 5 innings, maybe. Well, that means your bullpen just went 4+ innings the day before. So many times the Marlins are like, Sandy, just give us 8, give us 7, give us 6 2/3. So he's staying in the games. I didn't have the breakdown, but he had been way up there in terms of average pitches per inning. It's easy enough to look up on MLB.com. But he was in the 14s, while by comparison, Zach Gallen, who was in the Sandy trade, obviously with Arizona, who traded for the Jazz, he's in the 16 pitch per inning. Zach's a very effective pitcher, but he needs more pitches to get success and consequently leads to shorter outings. There's something about strike throwing and being on the attack, but then there's also something to say you could throw 99 and 100 when you need it.
Yeah.
And you have a power sinker that even if you give up contact, for the most part, it's more weak contact. And I thought, Buck Showalter of the Mets said after the game, and I read some quotes from him about Sandy, that it's coming. There's literally nothing in Sandy's playbook that surprises the opponents. It's just, here it is, hit it.
Right.
It's a 2-seamer, it's a 4-seamer, and it's a changeup and a slider from time to time. But it's like, and he's going to be around the plate. And still they're not hitting him.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those things where and you just see him, and it's one of those things. I'm kind of in awe at Sandy, and Sandy knows what he's doing on the mound. I could tell he's definitely a big believer in the mental aspect of things too, because if you look at him, every time a batter comes into the box or a guy is stepping there and he's adjusting, or he had to call time or something, Sandy always makes it a point, especially when he's in the windup, to be right there standing on the rubber before the batter's ready to go, kind of, here I am, it's coming, and there's nothing you can do about it.
You know who used to do that? Josh Beckett. When Beckett was Beckett, when he was pitching and he was the baddest gunslinger on the planet in those starts, that's what he would do. He'd just be like,
just right there,
ready to go. Like you could step off, you could step out, but it's coming and you got to hit it. And again, it's been fun to watch, and it's it gets to the debate. We've kind of debated it before. Should he start the All-Star game? What I can tell you is sometimes you never know. The team may say, look, the workload is the workload. As long as he pitches, if you need him in the third inning, fine. And there's usually a courtesy call, to see if it doesn't go to Donnie, it'll go to Mel, or be deferred to Mel being the pitching coach. And that's just kind of the process.
Right.
I believe San Diego's Friday. It would be 4 days then for the All-Star game. In the Marlins' eyes, he could start that game. He would be fine. They'd probably want him to go 1 inning, not 2, I would think, just because, who knows what, Friday's start's going to look like. But the Marlins are in it to a degree.
Right.
So it's not like they're out of it. This is his big moment. So, those are just some of the internals. Again, there could be pressure in L.A. with Tony Gonsolin, Dodger Stadium. There could be pressure to go that way. There might be Dave Roberts feeling he owes it to his guy. But these are not Dave Roberts. It's meaning, I think Dave Roberts will be on the staff. Brian Snitker makes the call. But, there is kind of the league kind of knows who is starting these games as well. So it'd be interesting to see, Sandy has become getting a lot more national attention, a lot more mention in national type shows of being deserving. But that's going to be interesting. And again, I wouldn't be shocked if either way. I wouldn't be shocked if Sandy gets it, and I wouldn't be shocked if Tony Gonsolin gets it. Just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I've even seen a late push for Clayton Kershaw recently to start the game, which I think is a little bit more, I think that's almost more in line with Albert Pujols and Miguel Cabrera getting on the roster. Not that Kershaw isn't deserving this year. He very much is to be an all-star, but I don't think he should be on the mound starting that game. But he will come in the game. He will pitch. It'll be a great moment in Dodger Stadium, for him and what he's meant for that franchise. But I think you got to you give it to Sandy. Come on. I mean, this is the guy that it should be. You should want to promote the absolute best of the best at the All-Star game. This should be more. It shouldn't be regionalized to say, well, we got to cater to Southern California. This is where you put your best players as a league on display. So I would go Sandy McClanahan.
Yeah, very good points, and maybe that's where it goes. And in terms of merit, it tends to be, if Kershaw gets it's a Lifetime Achievement Award, and there's no disputing that he would be deserving of that if you choose to.
If you're going to do that,
if you choose to give the Lifetime Achievement Award,
then go Verlander on the other side.
Yeah. Well, that's the guy I also, when we talk about McClanahan, is a guy that I wouldn't be surprised if baseball wanted that matchup either. These are things to consider. I think but what is part of baseball's, PR problem is the big it's perceived by the casual fan to the non-fan is, oh, they just care about the Yankees, Red Sox, Dodgers, Cubs, that type of stuff. And if you don't go on merit in a year where merit is deserved, it isn't like you got a bunch of even guys with pedestrian type of stats. Then you are basically just feeding that, because you're basically saying Miami's not a big enough baseball market in our eyes. Sandy Alcantara is not a big enough name in our eyes, and therefore we'll go this route, which would be more trendy in the bigger markets. So it is also a good opportunity. I think the fact that Brian Snitker knows Sandy so well from facing him, he could probably make that call fairly easily. But is it Brian Snitker's call? I tend to think it might be 42% his call, and then the league
Right.
or whatever could be leaning. But that's an interesting debate. We're not there yet. We'll celebrate that Sandy's there. Quickly, let's slide over to Jazz, because this is a little different one, because
Yep.
Jazz hasn't played since June 24th. He's on the IL with the back. We all know the type of year Jazz has been having. We know the charisma. We know in the league's eyes, Jazz is the Marlin, right? He's more of
Right.
the marketing tool. The Jazz is the one on the commercials. Jazz is the one, his flair, the everything about him, the way he plays the
Hmm.
game. That's what baseball is promoted, more than the kind of here I am, straight face,
Right.
Andy
Exactly.
Alcantara,
Yeah.
kind of quiet. He just does his talking on the mound. Uh, Obviously, Jazz has the back issue. Just an update. Jazz, there was a Zoom call with Jazz with the media on Friday. I was part of that, and Jazz said that he was hoping to be back on the field this week, and did not rule out in his eyes. We haven't heard yet from the Marlins if he's going to be clear to play sometime later this week. But I think in Jazz's eyes, he is not ruling out the possibility of not just going to LA celebratorily, but to be playing and being an active member, whether it's one at bat, but just for him, that experience getting voted in. I can see why Jazz, who plays for the spotlight, who plays for fun, and would be great representation for the Marlins as well, to have he and Sandy, but more specifically Jazz.
Yeah. I think, like I said, I think as far as they go with Jazz, if Jazz is cleared to play in a major league ball game by the time the All-Star game comes around, then I don't think there's any real tangible harm in letting him go, because at that point, if he's gonna pull his back in the first at bat of an All-Star game, then he was gonna pull his back in the first at bat of the first game he came back. So I wouldn't sit here and bemoan the Marlins for that. I think that would be playing, armchair Monday morning quarterback on that. But I do think, if it's just a matter of, oh well, he's played in maybe one or two rehab games, and we wouldn't have him back in the lineup yet at the big league level, then that's a different conversation. Then I think he should be held out. But if the Marlins get to a point where they say, you know what, if there was a game on the day of the All-Star game and he would be in the lineup as normal, then I'm on the side of, let him play, let him have the experience. It's a good thing for him.
I don't know the technicality of it, but I would think he would technically have to be on the active big league roster.
Okay.
I mean, I would think that would just be, even if it's not a written rule, I
Right.
think it would be just kind of make sense protocol wise to
Right.
say, oh, the Marlins don't have him on there and he's still on the IL, but he's able to play in the All-Star game. I imagine there could be issues with liability in the CBA and
Right.
things like that. So those things have to be determined. Knowing Jazz, he's going to basically say he's fine, I'm sure, if they ask
Absolutely.
him, and he will do all he can to be on the field. Now there are plenty of players that are nicked up, that are playing either as DHs and whatnot right now. So Jazz could be out there. He could, I'm sure he was thinking about it and is probably doing all he can to be out there. And just, I mean, he's the first Bohemian ever voted in as a starter. And, and so this is a big deal, not just for him personally, but the country and, and the
Right.
island and, just for the sport. I'm pulling, I'm basically kind of deferring to what Jazz probably isn't saying that, although Jazz might say whatever he wants anyway. But he's probably knowing that he can play, because he didn't have any red flags going up in our little conversations with him.
Oh, that's always good to hear. I do think it'll be interesting to see if he does go. Obviously, I'd like to see him participate just because of what he brings, and I think that would be really solid on a national level. But just to kind of bring things back a little bit into into the Marlins side of things, away from the exhibition games and into the real ones. The Marlins have put themselves, as you mentioned, in position to be kind of quasi buyers at the deadline. I don't know how realistic it is that they actually buy. I already see the I can already see the the interview where oh well we're getting Jazz and Jorge Soler coming back, and that's like our deadline acquisitions. I
Edward
already see
Cabrera
that
is going to
coming.
come
Yeah,
back, and
I
Sixto
see that.
Sanchez. We got Max Meyer.
I
Yeah.
see that being the conversation really, and it might be for the best because I don't know if this team is really worth going all in on. But what's your feeling on that?
I could speak, what I feel they should do, and I could speak on what I'm hearing. Let's start with what I'm hearing, and these are from my people I contact with, and they, being around the team from when I get out there. They are definitely all over trade targets. They are definitely exploring a ton of options. I would be surprised if they don't make at least one move. I believe they will be sellers, but I think it'll be more, or excuse me, buyers, not sellers. No, back that track up. In more of a modest, like make sense additions without going all in with some major splash move. I do believe, to your point, that this crew, and I think Donnie even said it post game, or in a story I read about, they kind of are going to go with what they got. I think that they
Right.
realize that they've kind of been a patient team with this group. Oh, Garcia will get hot. Oh, Aguilar will have a better second half. I see that they're going to kind of follow that. I think I use the term cautious buyers.
Yeah.
They do, their main targets are what we've been saying for a while now, bullpen. And that's not just to say, oh, they need a lockdown closer. We've discussed this weeks ago, and we'll keep doing it. Do all teams that are contenders or think they are seek extra bullpen help, because your bullpen is needed to win these games late. And so you're going to need multiple experienced options, because if you're winning 6 of 7 or 7 of 8, chances are your closer's got about 4 saves in that mix. And
Right.
so you need multiple players who can close. So that's why they're looking for bullpen. In terms of, I think if we looked at the landscape of the team positionally, and we could say, how could we be a little bit better in certain areas, defensively in center? Is Sanchi our best option, or is there somebody else? I think those talks, Eric, are more in line. How healthy is Jazz? How long
Right.
is Soler? Is Wendell going to hold up? Miggy got a little banged up yesterday. Like, injury may override positional specificity. So instead of just saying let's go get a center fielder, which is social media's buzzword, it's more let's make sure we have as much healthy bodies wherever those healthy bodies could be. I bring up a player like a Brad Miller in Texas,
Yep.
who is one of those Swiss Army knife guys, Joey Wendell type, who plays a very good second base, third base, play first. You can run him out in left field. And the Rangers are one of those 4 or 5 under. They're kind of like the American League version of the Marlins right
Yeah.
now. And they got some really good prospects like Ezekiel Duran, who could just come up and be in the big leagues if they move a Brad Miller. I thought the Phillies, after Harper got hurt and Brad Miller played previously for the Phillies, should have made a move to try to get Brad Miller, by already. Maybe they have, but that type of player, I think the
Yeah.
Marlins could pursue. And I'm not saying they're going to pursue Brad Miller. Maybe they are, and maybe I'm smarter in my evaluation. But that's the type of player I would be looking at, because he can address several needs, and he get to hit the ball at the ballpark. He can play anywhere on the field, and he's that type of grind it out once you get down to meaningful games type player.
Yeah, I think you've got. I mean, there's definitely a few guys around the league that I think can kind of fill that need for the Marlins. Guys that can play, a couple spots in the outfield, a couple spots in the infield. I think that's probably it'd be wise of them to do that, just because, like you said, how healthy are these guys going to be, and just having that extra versatility. We've seen what it's done for them this year, and being able to play John Birdie all over the place and being able to play Joey Wendell all over the place. It's helped them quite a bit. But to your point about the bullpen, I think the Marlins have one or two luxuries that few other teams have, and that is, I think that they have really good long options in the bullpen. In guys like Daniel Castano and Cody Poteet and Braxton Garrett, and I think that that's going to be really positive for them. I think as you look to what you want to do is you want to get as many high leverage guys as possible, and kind of, because you're not going to get, a team's not going to put a closer out there with like 20 saves, on the market. You're that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, you're looking at like a Daniel Bard. You're looking at
exactly
who was it, Lopez in Baltimore. There's only a couple of these teams, and every team is looking for, every team that's in contention is looking for the same arms. Right. So then you're in a bidding war for Daniel Bard when your best hope is the sixth wild card. The sixth playoff spot, third wild card.
Right. So again, I mean, you're just hoping to get as many high leverage guys as possible. In the Marlins case, I mean, it's never more than one or two at the deadline. I feel like they're not going to add, an entirely new bullpen. I think with Okert, Bass, Scott, you really need maybe one or two other guys that you feel confident pitching in the 8th and 9th inning in those high leverage, situations. I do want to give a hat tip yesterday to Don Mattingly, because I think it took, quite a bit of courage to go back to Tanner Scott, especially considering that he had thrown 33 pitches in the two outings before that. And it was really a nod to, I believe it's Saturday night, outside of the air, I think Scott pitched really well, and he should have done enough to get them the win. But ultimately, I do think you're right. You add a couple of leverage arms and maybe another, utility guy.
Yeah, and to the point on Scott, and that's typically what managers like to do. Yeah, you either lose confidence and my closer's out.
Yep.
And I'm going with a different closer, and those conversations are made, before the game, and you just go up and say, hey, look, we're going to go something else. You're kind of struggling here. We'll put you in like lower leverage innings, and we're going to use a committee. Or you could sit around and say, this is my guy, and I want him back out there to get that taste in his mouth,
right.
Get rid of that taste in his mouth. And what people need to realize, and I think the smart Marlin fan, because I've seen a lot of comments, and I think people are getting smarter down here and they're getting it. Tanner Scott did really well on Saturday. He got he struck out Escobar. He struck out, I forgot who else, Guillorme, I think, gives up weak contact on the double, and then he gets Nimmo to basically just hit a comebacker. It was a lack of execution on fielding. That's a big difference. It's not like he got knocked around. It's not like he's just throwing, oh my gosh, these guys are just not going to cover off the ball on him. That's a totally different argument. So if I'm Scott, I'm feeling better about myself in terms of that. They didn't hit my stuff. I made a fielding mistake, a fundamental mistake. Now, part of that, you can't have those, obviously, but we saw the Yankees a couple of nights ago lose to the Red Sox because Josh Donaldson couldn't handle the game-ending double play ball.
Right.
He bobbled that. He ended up getting one out, kept the game alive, and the Red Sox walked him off. And that's what's happening right now with all these teams fighting. One little miscue, and it's not just Tanner Scott, and he's easy to pick on because he's the one with the ball last. It's just general executing that.
Absolutely.
A lot more often than not, you're making the plays you have to make to win the games. So, yeah, that's where I think the Marlins are. Let's segue real briefly to the rest of the league. And Tampa Bay, I'm worried about them. Eric, Kiermaier now, it looks like he's going back on the IL. He, with that hip, Wander Franco has the hamate issue, which more than likely will require surgery, which is 6 to 8 weeks. So we're looking 2 months. It just hasn't broken for them. Maybe this isn't, the year, even though being over 500 the way they are, they're really being tested. I think they got to be careful of what they do at the deadline. Knowing them, they got internal players that could come up. They've got a great system.
Right.
It's a shame from their end because Shane McClanahan, their all-star, is having a Cy Young caliber year. Is it's finally biting the Rays that there's just a little too much adversity for them?
I mean, every team, you play the game long enough, your franchise long enough, you're gonna have a year like this. It happens to every single team, and I think unfortunately, it's just one of those years for the Rays where I would be surprised, especially in a division as competitive as the AL East, if they're able to really hold it together. I mean, it's just going to take an otherworldly effort from their depth.
Yeah, they're getting some starting pitching back, like Shane Baz is back,
Yep.
and that can help them weather it. But they're just got swept by the Reds. We're seeing the Red Sox are red hot.
Yep.
And they this is a big week for them because the Red Sox got the Rays and the Yankees. The Yankees are kind of running away with it, even though they had a couple of bad nights in a row.
Right.
But we do want to touch on Stanton getting voted into the All-Star game. It's an interesting one, Eric. I think you mentioned a good point with Julio Rodriguez out in Seattle. I personally have no problems with Giancarlo ever being voted in, and I kind of bring up years that Giancarlo didn't have his, when Giancarlo was in Miami and had big numbers and wasn't voted in, yet, he might get in as a reserve. Now he doesn't have, the homers, RBIs are there, but the batting average, the overall game isn't there. But I think it's an interesting point because you being a younger guy, me being an older guy, the All-Star game, a lot, I think, to people of my generation, there's an appreciation of I mentioned with Kershaw, of just kind of longevity of what a guy meant to the game. A younger fan is more caught up in the moment and deserving and merit at the moment. And I think that's an interesting, dynamic as you go into this exhibition, because you do have, a guy that's going to probably hit 500 homers in Stanton. And then you got a kid like Rodriguez who's so dynamic, who you want to promote, the young superstar in the making in a market like Seattle compared to New York. Just your thoughts on those two players.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that I don't think Stanton deserves to be in the All-Star game, because I absolutely do. I just think that when you look at a guy like Julio Rodriguez, and at his age, you're putting him up there with, because as sports fans in general, we're enamored with this idea of potential, of what you can do versus what you have done, and what you will be versus what you are. And I think nothing exemplifies that more than a guy like Julio Rodriguez, who has already tantalized us with what he has done, and we kind of think of him in that same capacity as other great young players that we've seen, Ronald Acuna, Juan Soto, and so we think of what he can be more than necessarily what he is right now.
Oh, no doubt, and I think there's a good argument to be made for both, and I think that people need to kind of open their eyes and recognize that you can appreciate what Stanton is doing, and then keep this in mind. In 2017, Giancarlo was the National League most valuable player. He wasn't voted to start the game in Miami, but Marcell Ozuna was.
Absolutely.
Now Stanton, because they used the DH in the NL Park, it was one of those, like, they were floundering around with different ideas, that Stanton started the game, but he wasn't voted it in.
Right.
So this is it is interesting, the first time that he's been voted in, because if you go back to Stanton, if he doesn't get hurt in the end of the 14 season, probably wins the most valuable player award in 14. And could have won it in 17. He would have been a two-time MVP already. And his legacy, it would be more Hall of Fame talk than, just kind of an underperforming, or, a guy, if he always had injuries.
Could have been,
could have been this or that. And then on the flip side, we do like that dynamic young player. Rodriguez is such a freaky player because he's that speed, power.
Exact five-tool guy.
Plays a premium center field. What's the big talk in Miami? Oh, we want a true center fielder. Well, there are very few true center fielders, but he kind of is a true center fielder. Just so super athletic, and we want to see them, which is why I just think when the All-Star game comes, play all these guys, give them at least that one at bat, give them at least that one inning, or at least a couple of batters, and get these players out there. But the sport's in a good spot, in terms of its talent. I think the playoffs are in a good spot where you got teams like the Marlins that are in it, the Rays are in it, obviously, but can they hold on? And then the All-Star game coming out, and we're gonna have the draft. We're gonna probably hit on a little bit as well as we get closer. But we're going to kind of wrap this one up. Obviously, Eric, tell everyone where they can find us, and remind everyone on that 5 reasons on that YouTube, like and subscribe. And Eric will take us out of here, and we'll see you next time, everyone.
Yeah, so you can follow us on Twitter at ManOnSecond. That's going to be at ManOn2ND, and you can catch all of our videos on the 5 Reasons Sports YouTube channel. So thank you guys, and we will see you next time.